Morning, everyone.
Morning.
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 Morning, Stora.
Morning.
Morning, guys.
Morning, everybody.
Patrick.
Yes.
Hello, Wally.
Morning.
Greetings.
Yeah.
Hello, George. Hi.
Hey. How are you, George?
How's it, Mike?
How's it, Wally?
Very
Good to
well,
see
very well,
you.
Captain.
Still
Good to see
going.
you. Yes. Lovely day in Durban, I see.
Yeah, lovely.
Here too.
George, you're borrowing shirts from the staff again.
Yeah. We cruising, we're cruising.
I've got a problem with my computer, guys. Please pardon me. I promise it's not a video on or off. It's I don't know what happened, but I'm here.
We believe you.
Hearing is believing today, Skura, so it's fine. Sorry, Monique, your audio is very low. We didn't hear that at all. Nice to see everybody out and about this Friday morning. Welcome to the SAIA KZN Practice Breakfast.
Morning.
Morning, Wally, all the way from Cape Town.
Good morning, Skura. Greeting. Good to see you guys all.
I think we can start. We just lost some time because we were just trying to figure out my video situation, which we actually we failed to sort out. Welcome everyone to our practice breakfast this morning. Today we have EPA presenting to us. If you don't know the practice, welcome to KZN. It's a multi-award winning practice. Steel Awards, KZN Regional Awards, SAIA National Merit Awards, Award of Excellence for Investec and the EPA office, and many international awards as well. The first time I heard of EPA, or one of the first buildings I knew about the practice, was the Lesotho Post Office. It's a fantastic corner building in Maseru, and with a beautiful cladding of sandstone, very contextual for that region. That was when I was starting architecture back in 1999, I think it was. They've done so many landmark buildings since then. So Greg and George, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Happy Friday. And thank you for the opportunity to be able to share with you guys a little insight into this remarkable opportunity to give something back to the city of Durban. In today's economic climate and the nature of our urban growth patterns, it's not a common opportunity to secure an architectural opportunity to engage in what promotes urban regeneration and the embodiment of the fundamentals of identity and placemaking are a relatively rare set of opportunities in the South African context, unfortunately. So this presentation takes you through on a very broad basis the KwaZulu Cruise Terminal project down on the point. And it's an opportunity that the EPA practice group grasped with open arms and put everything into the project. And we're hoping that this record of our journey will provide you with an understanding of the process, the sales pitch, the journey of executing the project, which is literally just in its final completion stages before the first cruise arrives in a matter of a few weeks. So with that introduction, an important thing to say is that Durban still remains the cruise capital of sub-Saharan Africa and has been for many years. So the original T-Jetty cruise terminal, which building, I think we're all aware, has been recently threatened with demolition, became redundant some years ago, largely due to the nature of the way cruises operate, but perhaps more importantly, the draft and ability to sustain the receiving of large vessels. So the nature of the cruise industry globally is or has been pre-COVID and hopefully beyond a burgeoning business. And so the original cruise terminal was replaced by Enshed, which is on the end of the jetty, as we illustrate here, which has been a temporary terminal for many years. And like many cities, including the likes of Miami, interestingly, it's a very poor portal for cruises from all perspectives. And frankly, the reality is that terminals are sheds, but the journey and the experience of those sheds is part and parcel of the cruise experience and part of, if you like, the tourist business model. So in 2015, 2016, there was a publicly advertised concession offer to engage in the creation of a new terminal. This was issued by Transnet, and Erky Wood from GAP and I looked at this interestingly, and we created a response to Transnet to point out to them that there were massive possibilities for greater urban regeneration and engagement. Interestingly, we were heavily berated in the press for behaving like architects in a responsible way, we hoped. And following that, the concession didn't proceed, and I'm sure it wasn't as a result of our narrative. In any event, in 2018, the concession was re-advertised, and MSC, the Mediterranean Shipping Company, which is a family-owned business based in Switzerland, were granted the concession by Transnet after significantly protracted negotiations. So MSC has two elements to it. One is the cargo business, which is a giant international organization, as I'm sure you're all familiar, which is the larger of the two entities. And then the smaller of the two is the cruise business, which is very substantial and of course competes variously with other cruise businesses based in Europe and the United States, and it's a global business. So with the granting of that concession came along the requirement to engage in a local joint venture partner. And Turner and Townsend, as project managers and cost consultants together with Arab, were engaged by MSC in Geneva to initiate the new cruise terminal project for Durban. So an important thing to understand is whilst this building has an apparent public, let's say, ownership, if you like, from an urban point of view, it's actually a private investment. And so we were invited to engage in a competitive architectural bid, and various architects were invited in July of 2018 to prepare our credentials and present ourselves in Geneva. So we grasped this opportunity with both hands and put a lot of effort in, as I think our competitors did, to present ourselves with our Sunday best in Geneva. One of the key considerations in our bid was to engage with two key partners, one of them being GAP, Erky Wood and Sarvan Naidu in Johannesburg as our urban designers, and with VUSA, Jonathan Edkins, as the long-standing ex-city architect to work with us to help us architecturally from an urban design perspective and to ensure a smooth ride with the city's catalytic unit. So Greg and I flew to Geneva to present ourselves to Italians, Swiss people, Argentinians, and others who comprise the committee who received our presentation. And I think what we've learned as an architectural practice is that the sales pitch is an absolutely key consideration in any project. And the fundamental cornerstones of our bid was the collaborative process or collaborative approach, which we offered together with connectivity into other international partners in the transport architectural space, the resources that we offer as a large practice, and of course, what we saw as our capability to undertake a project of this nature. So there are not too many architects who've undertaken cruise terminals before. It's a rarity, I think, globally. And interestingly, we were able to research many new cruise terminals globally, mainly in the United States and in the Caribbean islands to a lesser extent, and in Europe. So the key considerations in our presentation then revolved around the urban opportunity. We were very fortunate that Mr. Vargo, who is the son-in-law of the patriarch in the family ownership of the business, had lived in South Africa for some years, and he recognized the importance and the value of the urban engagement. This I think is a relatively rare consideration, given that it's a commercial venture. But with that principle, we drove the idea of engagement with the city as a landmark, and reinforced the fact that their investment could actually become a landmark in the city, which would then amplify their business opportunity. And the MSC team recognized this, together with the value of the interface with the immediate historic fabric. So the connectivity to the point, in particular, the point precinct, and the vision that was created for this some 20 years ago starts to receive the opportunity to play out. So our competition bid then elaborated on the connectivity opportunities to other to the Heritage Quarter and its interface along Mahatma Gandhi Road, to the existing urban spaces along Browns Road from a visual and spatial perspective, and the pedestrian connectivity in the long term that would be offered through that connection back to the promenade. So we drove home the fact that their investment would be a catalytic opportunity to spark renewed investment in a failing point. And to be, I think one needs to be kind of really brutal about understanding, you know, the very poor uptake in the point and the reasons for that. And we felt that this may have a much greater impact than simply being a building which receives 3,500 visitors or disgorges them from the landside onto a ship unceremoniously. We felt that there was a wonderful opportunity to make something that reinforces the idea or reinforces the fact that Durban is the cruise center of sub-Saharan Africa. So the principles of understanding to some extent the nature of cruise tourism, what it is, and how the public realm may be enhanced to engage in this building's public opportunity, if you like, became the cornerstones of our bid. And this diagram really illustrates those urban principles, which subsequently we've tried to amplify with engagement in the city to connect through to the extended promenade, with recognition but without execution, unfortunately, at this point. So we created a conceptual approach to, once we had really engaged with the fundamental functional requirements, and our sales pitch, if you like, picked up on one of the key emotive issues around tourism. I think this was a fortunate kind of structural tenet of our bid, because clearly,
George, I think we've lost your volume.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, good, thanks.
So our conceptual bid spoke of the gateway to the kingdom of the Zulus, which Durban is and always will be. And so the principle of contextual understanding and the promotion of an African identity, I think, being very emotive issues, drove home the understanding that tourism is about arriving at a place and how to reinforce the portal to that place. So the emotive aspects of our conceptual framework focused around these four principles in African craft. The first being the idea of color, bearing in mind that the building, a cruise building, is generally much lower than the height of a cruise ship, which can be as high as 65 to 70 meters off the water level. So you've always people standing on the decks, in the upper decks, looking down on the building. So we felt that the rooting of this building into kind of its African context, and indeed more specifically the Durban context, which from a Berea perspective and visibly from the harbour back onto the Berea, exhibits extensive terracotta roofs. So colour was an important connecting element or reinforcement element in our approach. The principle of texture, which is embodied in African craft, as you see, and the motif of the triangle, which is a characteristic of Southern African craft. And then an important element was the principle of African structure. So the African grid is not a European grid, and we recognize the random, arbitrary, and beautiful nature of traditional beehive huts. And we took all of these ideas that you see here and amalgamated them into a conceptual drive to give us the opportunity to hopefully be successful. So the inspirational aspects that we've just been through are then translated into the terracotta color of this building, the significant application of the triangular motif, the idea of texture and how that's translated into the skin of the building, and then the application of a very, very simple plan form, and then its manipulation, which incidentally was done with bits of paper in an airport, and the creation of a transportation of the grid from grounded position in an African format to a regular, if you like, Eurocentric grid structure, which then formed the kind of economic structure of the building. One of the other key aspects was the idea that we recognized the principle of the fact that the cruise business only operates for 6 to 7 months of the year. So an investment then that lies fallow for 5 months of the year would be a real waste. So our endeavor was to show that notwithstanding the rigorous planning considerations and spatial demands from a security point of view and functional perspective, that it may be possible for this shed, if you like, to become something else that reinforced its public nature, and as importantly, induced a commercial opportunity for MEC and its JV partner, KCT. So our planning arrangement and our proposal drove home the idea that there would be an income generator in off-season. So having secured the architectural opportunity and embedded in the team of Turner and Townsend and Arup as all undertaking all the engineering aspects, our team with Erky and Sarvin and Jonathan embarked on the execution of this building from a design point of view, 4 trips to and fro to Geneva, together with engaging with the client on the selection of a contractor, was a really fun task. carrying samples of the facade cladding solution, which collapsed mid-flight and then had to be re-glued in Geneva before a meeting. All of those exciting stories kind of built this journey. And of course, along came COVID pandemic, which interrupted this process. And, you know, like any business, of course, entirely, well, not entirely, but substantially decimated the consistent income of our client, who then through and with the persistence, assistance and fortitude of our project manager, Bruce Ross, and a cooperative and enthusiastic client and their head office people in Johannesburg, Ross Falk and his team, we facilitated the continued construction of the project with an alternative funding method. And so this then overcame the massive financial issue and implications of a delayed concession with the timeframes that were installed by Transnet. And then added to this, the challenge of having to reinforce the quayside, which it was discovered was unable to withstand the 140,000 ton vessel, which is the now the larger vessel, which is going to be entering Durban Harbour for future cruises. So a massive marine engineering exercise had to be undertaken, and this affected the building and the position of the building and the nature of the construction methodology and all of those good things that one becomes relatively used to, save for the fact that this was an entirely adjunct operation, which we also had to dovetail into. So it made for a very, very interesting journey. And so we now kind of move forward into the real stuff now that I've given you the sales pitch, and I'm going to hand you over to Greg.
Thanks, George. I think perhaps I should preface this by stating the obvious, that an ocean liner terminal is essentially a transportation hub, albeit a fundamentally leisure-driven one. The terminal as an archetype functions in a reasonably similar way to an airport, but with some fundamental differences. And those fundamental differences relate mainly to movement, traffic, and people. So the difference is that an airport, although it receives huge amounts of traffic, that traffic exists over an extended and somewhat sustained period. Whereas a terminal, which functions mainly over 2 days, experiences very immediate short-term traffic, almost at full capacity. And that happens, the system attempts to stagger embarkation times over a 3 to 4 hour period, but people in their excitement to get on the ship generally all want to board at 9 a.m. sharp. So that poses the problem of 2,500 to 3,500 people all arriving at the same time. So that changes the way in which this functions. So although the larger functions remain relatively similar to that of an airport in terms of the systems, the larger scale is really driven off how that is handled. So the site itself, as per the previous slide, positioned along Mahatma Gandhi Road, sandwiched between Mahatma Gandhi Road and the harbour. On the southern edge runs the Transnet sterile zone, and that is a secure zone that is inaccessible aside from, once someone has gone through a home affairs and immigration type situation. So the site distribution basically deals with that traffic flow, and the traffic flow, as you can see in blue, runs along the northern perimeter. The site is accessed just below Albert Terrace at the word entrance. with a long-term parking facility to the eastern edge, and that accommodates approximately 300 vehicles, which would obviously be stored over the duration of a cruise, which is a 3 to 4 day endeavor. The traffic deals with flow transversely across the site, and that entrance allows for vehicular traffic, which deals with cars and buses. The taxi component has been kept outside of the site just because it's very difficult to control and difficult to manage. And that transpires along the parallel parking bays along Mahatma Gandhi Road. So traffic is dealt with by entering just below Albert Terrace and then exiting on the western edge, just along that green strip. The building is positioned centrally, and that is a function of the scale of a ship and how the ship is accessed. Ships are generally in excess of 300 meters long, and those gangways, entry gangways, can happen anywhere. It just depends on the ship. So it made sense to centralize the terminal in the site, just to allow an extended walkway from an access point of view. Then just to elaborate on George's urban agenda, we integrated a public piazza, and the site, and I'll show you in the next slide, is developed in such a way as to promote public spaces, to activate, to become an activation mechanism within the Point precinct. And this is an extension, almost a cyclic extension from the new promenade that would run along the eastern edge of the harbour mouth, along Mahatma Gandhi Road, and then back up Browns Road, up back to the promenade. And this building and this piazza space provides an extension of that. So the next slide shows the final sort of derivation of our site layout. The differential colors describe the different paving options that we've used, as well as the landscape methodology, which has been deployed across the site. The service access, which is the access that allows serviceability to the ship, is on the western edge, and that is controlled via a guardhouse on the southwest edge. So the other fundamental difference between an ocean liner terminal and an airport really relates, and again, this is a traffic related issue, relates to how baggage is handled. So in a typical airport scenario, all of the check-in processes and baggage handling processes are dealt with at the check-in counters prior to one going through an immigration or into a secure zone. In a terminal, the baggage handling happens separate to that. And here in this diagram, the terminal is based on 3 major components. So the first is the check-in hall, the second is a baggage handling hall, and the third is an immigration hall. And those 3 components are separated by the service and office-related devices. And those office-related devices mainly accommodate the ancillary bathroom functions as well as the governmental infrastructures. So pretty simple, really. Not a very complex layout. This building exists over 3 levels. We've got an interstitial service level, which is our level 1, and that simply houses all of the HVAC and mechanical equipment. And then a second level, which deals with a potential phase 2 scenario. And that phase 2 scenario will accommodate a disembarkation and embarkation hall at a later stage. And what that relies on is the principle of separating people and service components. At the moment, in the current scenario, people are kept to the eastern side of the quayside, while all service functions would happen to the west. In this scenario, once this is fitted out, and just to bear in mind, we have built this slab and we have made allowances for future escalators and lifts. We just haven't fitted it out. On the southern edge is what is referred to as a passerella, which is our future passerella, and that'll allow the mechanism of entry and exit onto the ship via mechanical fingers, and those will come at a later stage. So the principal flow diagrams related to the terminal. One would enter the site, park in the long-term parking, or otherwise get dropped off via bus or by car. The first port of call would be the baggage drop-off, which you can see in green on the western edge, lower western edge. Bags are dropped off and processed in this zone, and then people exit the building and re-enter it into the check-in hall. Once inside there, they go through the secure zone into the check-in hall and then proceed as one would proceed in a normal airport type scenario. So that would entail checking in and then going through an immigration type scenario and then exiting onto the quayside. The disembarkation process, the reverse of that, except that one would exit, go through the immigration processes, and then collect baggage, and then through a home affairs scenario, so either items to declare or items not to declare, and then exit the site. Just to elaborate or illustrate what George referred to earlier in terms of the seasonal functionality. So obviously the cruise season extends only over a 7-month period of the year. The building allows for this by allowing a flexibility in the large hall spaces. So in the top diagram, between the blue and green areas, you'll notice a dashed line. This is a sliding stacking door system that is openable, that allows those spaces to connect. And in the lower diagram would show you how that would function at a later stage, or at least out of season. So there'd be conference event spaces with pre-function areas, and these could be any type of event related activities. And then obviously we allow accessibility to those ancillary functions, the ablution blocks, the kitchens, all of those components. This next slide just illustrates the transverse section across the site, the relationship from Mahatma Gandhi Road all the way through to the quayside. The ship would obviously be on the right-hand side, building sandwiched in between those. The palm trees that you see there delineate the edge of Mahatma Gandhi Road, and then everything on the right-hand side of that would be traffic flow and inside of the site. Also illustrates the volume metrics within the building, so that the grand halls and the check-in and baggage zones with the passerella on the top right-hand side. So from a technical point of view, as George has mentioned, this terminal is basically a large shed with some stuff inside of it. Our main focus was related to the detail of this canopy or envelope, building envelope component. Simplistically put, it's basically a concrete structure that holds up a reasonably typical primary steelwork lattice structure that is then clad with aluminium profiled sheets, which forms our weather line. And on top of that, we clip on our Mineralis fiber cement panels, which are modulated in terms of the triangulation of each of the respective elevations. And that creates a ventilated facade, which reasonably complicated, to put it lightly. Then just to take you through the current imagery we have of the building. So as George mentioned, the building has only just recently been complete. We're still in the defects phases of the building. So a lot of these photographs do show some incomplete components, but we just wanted to take you guys through the spaces around the building, the spaces in the building, and just the overall aesthetic related to the building. So this view is taken from the northwest edge, which shows the entry condition. On the right-hand side, the dark wall, that's the baggage handling zone. The left glazed edge is the check-in entry, and outside of that, in amongst those randomized columns is the public piazza zone. And as you can see, the paving configurations can provide a sort of certain connectivity to the point precinct.
Sorry, Greg, before you go from there, I think this this illustrates very clearly the African grid on the ground related to this entrance canopy, which is the kind of visual catalyst of the building, because it aligns with the view coming down south, if you like, along Browns Road. And so up at the canopy interface, that's a regular grid. And on the ground, on the African random grid. And that's what gives rise to this particular forest of columns, which then variously incline in a very random sort of way. And then the obvious terracotta envelope of the building, which we've expounded on earlier.
These are just some sort of bird's eye drone shots, just showing the building in its context, showing the cladding system and the paving configurations. So this particular view, once again, shows the public piazza area. You can see a triangulated planter on the right-hand side, which the plants haven't quite taken as yet. And these images were taken on the last construction drone footage that we received, so they are a little outdated.
I think, Greg, to highlight an important point in this, and this image illustrates some of the kind of rationale behind the creation of this folded plate solution. So the lifting of the canopy on the northwestern edge we've described, and that was in the first slide. That invites you and compresses you somewhat as you enter the hall. On the opposite, diagonally opposite side of the building is a high point on the southeastern edge, if you like, and lifting that entire panel and triangulating it to create a seam which runs in a kind of Z-like fashion across the entire building. This provides the highest point of the building, which allows a visual connection upon entry and frames views of the ocean liner that you are about to enjoy for a week or 10 days. So one of the key aspects was a simple principle of compression at entrance and then expansion as one literally enters the space to embark on your cruise journey. So a very simple rationale behind generating this form, which then lifts and angles to suit functionality and visibility and connection back to the city from in spaces internally, as well as creating a covered passageway for people from the car park accessing or embarking on their journeys through the entrance of the terminal.
George, not to disturb, while we're on this view, I see on site there is now a fence between the street and the building. Was it something that the client asked for later?
Indeed. A very sore point and something we fought against hard, but unfortunately the nature of South African security and a concern of the client with respect to safety of passengers, when you have sort of a total of nearly 6,000 people on site, embarking, disembarking, the piazza full of people with luggage, and seen to be a potential target from a security point of view, and also when the building is not functioning mid-cruise, for example, the concern that the building would be defaced. So it's a very sad addition, which is a very late call on the part of the client, an extensive discussion around the installation of that. We fought hard against it, but you know, there are some battles you lose, and that's unfortunately a function of our societal condition.
No, absolutely. I do think it was noticeable for me, because the building is kind of an extension of the landscape, and you know, it's absolutely beautiful. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, George.
Okay, another view of that entrance, which I think we've all seen before. This is just taken from the bus parking area, looking again at that entry condition. This is a view taken from basically on the edge of that triangular planter, looking at the entry condition again, and with the piazza zone in front, baggage handling on the right-hand side, and the check-in zone on the left. In this view, you can see the pedestrian walkway sandwiched between the glazing and the cladding on the left of the building. So that deals with all the people, and then outside of the cladding zone deals with all the vehicles. Just another view of that. This view, just taken with our backs to the quayside, having a look at the relationship between the building and Mahatma Gandhi Road, and the Mahatma Gandhi Road context principally. You can see the white building just through the columns, and then Brown's Road just to the left of that. And taken from Mahatma Gandhi Road, just having a look at the eastern edge of the building. And this is the main vehicular traffic entry point. And then just some vignettes showing the facade cladding and detail components. This is taken on the northern facade. Again, the northern facade. And you'll notice that the panels are triangulated within the larger triangle. So the idea here was that we didn't want any cut triangles anywhere. So these triangles are essentially smaller versions of the much larger triangle. The faceted edges connect the differential triangulation or modulation on the inside and outside faces. And what is probably quite important to say here is that all of those triangles on those faceted edges are bespoke. Each and every single one of them is different. So a lot of hard work undertaken by the subcontractor involved. And this is just looking eastward towards the Bluff Hill. And then just some vignettes again of the eastern wall and the sort of clay pot type aesthetic that George alluded to earlier.
I think one of the most amazing experiences that we've had is the observation that the immediate neighbors across on Mahatma Gandhi have over the last 2 years upgraded, painted, been through rehabilitation. So we have a near complete stretch of Mahatma Gandhi Road, which is restored to its historic beauty, if you like, and that engagement from the inside of the space and the reflection in the glass of the building externally really is something perhaps that we didn't necessarily envisage. We have operating businesses, Robson's Brewery, there's some clothing shops, the Vodka Hotel, which is currently an operative, or rather the Quayside, is it, hotel. So I think it really creates what many people like Hans Helen and John Frost and Rodney Harbour and others had envisaged many, many years ago in the explorations of the point back in the late 70s and early 80s. So it's taken an awful long time to get there. So, you know, we're thrilled to have, you know, seen that other people have reacted to this opportunity very positively because they see the benefit of their kind of commercial offerings being significantly enhanced with so many people kind of arriving on their doorstep in the future. So that reinforces what I've just said, a view from the immediate entrance back out onto Mahatma Gandhi Road, and some of this, the really beautiful facades and excellently rehabilitated, really makes for an exciting outcome from our perspective. And that's really, I think, kind of reinforces the idea that this is a catalyst, or can be and has been a catalyst for the Point Precinct.
And then just a view on the other side of the check-in hall. You'll notice the check-in counters in the middle, and then the hall itself extending out down to the glazed entry, which George just discussed in the previous slide. And then just behind those check-in counters, you'll notice that bulkhead that stretches across the entire length, and that houses the sliding stacking doors, which we'll show you in a following slide. But those all stack away and open up to allow that conferencing component.
And yeah, all of those check-in counters are on casters, so they get moved away into a zone which acts as storage temporarily whilst the conference or other exhibition function can take place.
This taken at the entry again, just looking down the length of the check-in hall to the right of the check-in counters, and then you can see the closed configuration of those sliding doors, those African triangulated painted patterns, and then the porthole aperture, which takes one through into the immigration hall just beyond that grey box. And then at the upper level, that would be the phase 2 disembarkation embarkation hall that would come at a later stage. This view is taken inside of the immigration hall. So one arrives through on the right-hand side, just through that porthole, and then the timber joinery items, obviously the immigration counters. And then the glazed component at the far end is the access to the quayside. On the left-hand side, a bit obscured in this view, is an angled slab that takes one up to the second floor, and that will allow for the future escalators that'll be installed later.
Greg, what's your floor finish on the building?
It's an Artevia finish, a polished concrete. It's a very bespoke pattern that we chose. A lot of hard work went into trying to get it to what it is. So it's a dark pigment with a very fine stone.
Okay, lovely.
Then there's this just taken by the doors to the quayside, just looking back. So you see that triangular edge there, which is for the future escalators. And then the yellow box, which houses some of the government functions, mainly the health department behind there. But you also see the two-way glass, which houses the profile room, which is the government departments who sit and focus and observe passengers going through the immigration processes. Just a vignette of some of the signage components. And then this is the sliding stacking doors, which are patterned in a very African triangulated pattern. So this is what they look like in their closed condition prior to the joinery being installed. And then the last slide is drone footage, and this is drone footage was the last construction-based drone footage we received. So a little bit outdated, a little bit incomplete, but it'll take you through the building from an aerial point of view. So that's that. I think just to finish off from my side, and just to say that this project, you know, it was a humbling experience. It's been a labor of love for all of us here at EPA, and it's been an immensely collaborative process from our partners on the architectural urban side, to the consultant team, particularly our project management team, to our contracting team, and in many ways our subcontracting team, in particular MRC and the guys who did the cladding. I have to say it's you know, we've been astounded at the quality and professionalism that we've experienced throughout this construction phase. So I think a big thank you to all of them. I think that's it from me.
Cool. Yeah, that's it from us. Any questions?
Thank you guys, thank you so much. Before I just open the floor for everyone, I think there's something special about a talk like this, because unlike a magazine, it's much more interactive. I mean, the drone footage, the more photographs and the analytical diagrams, you get the picture much more clearer of a building than you would, let's say, in a printed magazine. So thank you so much, guys. It was absolutely clear, and congratulations and well done for that building. I mean, I'm absolutely fascinated by the geometry in the roof. That is really, really special. Can I just open the floor to anyone who would have a comment or a question?
Thanks very much for those kind words.
Yeah, if I may butt in, can I get in, Skura?
Yeah, come in.
I'm sorry, I missed the first 10 minutes or so of your address because I was fighting with Zoom. But can you tell me if I arrive with Granny, who's going on a cruise, an adventure, how do I and the kids see her off and see her getting onto the ship? What provision is there made for excited visitors? One of the great failures, I believe, of the King Shark International Airport is the fact that it's an opaque building, and you can't actually see what the hell is going on the forecourt if you're a visitor. Has there any provision been made, or how have you provided for visitors who are seeing Granny off or seeing Granny arrive back, or any other member of the family?
So Ken, very interesting point, and a key discussion that was held with the client at a very early stage. You will notice in all airports and in all cruise terminals that have been executed in the last 10 to, I guess, 15 years, the classic idea of arriving on a beautiful rooftop and then waving the ship goodbye, or the aeroplane as it disappears into the ether, is a thing of the past, and it's fundamentally around security. So you've picked up on a point which I think is it's a beautiful thing to be able to say bye-bye to everybody. And if you talk to the chairman of the group, Mr. Vargo, he'll tell you the words they use are kiss and cruise. So it's not a wave and cruise, it's a kiss and cruise. So that piazza substitutes that rooftop or balcony facility or interface that you refer to. And so from that piazza, you would be able to wave Granny goodbye as one did on the quayside, because you're outside of the secure zone. So bombings and terrorist threats and all of those things, I'm afraid, have put paid to that particular, let's say, very desirable thing that you describe.
Yeah, certainly security is the big bugbear, but I think it's been made such a huge issue of. But anyway, yep, okay, you've got an immediate problem there, but it is an important part of traveling. There is an excitement there, and a public participation that's being lost, I'm afraid, in the whole process. The other question that I have, if I may, is I don't notice any specific extra artworks. Is there any provision within the building now or in the future for artworks to be introduced, as there was very successfully with the original terminal?
Not specifically any artwork inside the building, Ken, but what they are currently doing is installing a large 8-meter diameter propeller just in the triangular planta off the piazza area. They're busy doing that as we speak. Very, very, very large undertaking. But that'll provide the sculptural focal point to that piazza zone, and is quite symbolic of the MSC sort of family as a whole and their business model as a whole. But inside the building,
Ken, could I venture to say that the building is the artwork?
Well done. Yes, quite right. No, it's a stunning building, but it's participation from the public does in fact help it to bridge that gap, makes it more of a human thing, more of an approachable thing. Anyway, terrific. Well done.
Thank you, Ken. Any other question?
George, can I ask you, firstly, just say to you and Greg, it's a great building, I think. The point that Greg made was that collaboration, and I think all good architecture is only possible through cooperation of all parties to both the design and the build process. You don't get great buildings by not having cooperation from all parties. One of the things I'd like to ask you, though, with that exposed wind situation across the bay, I'm assuming that your ventilated facade and your corrosion issues and things like that have been taken into account, particularly the high wind speeds that you get coming directly across the bay. Could you just give us an idea of that?
So, Ava, I mean, it's immensely corrosive environments. So that's been a fundamental consideration throughout the technical detailing phase. The issue is not with the ventilated facade. Actually, currently speaking, we're busy replacing all the roller shutter doors because they ballooned in and the terminal hasn't been handed over yet. And that's purely from a wind-driven perspective. These things have just ballooned and are literally pulling off the walls. So a very, very fair comment. I think that the envelope itself has handled everything beautifully. It's been designed beautifully, and we've had absolutely no issues thus far. It's been on, as I say, some of the ancillary components where we're starting to see those issues.
Yeah, I think, Ivor, to reinforce that, I think you know, in South Africa we tend to underestimate the wind. You know, we now see with our practice in Mauritius how critical the wind factor is in early discussions. And you've picked up on something which our subcontractors who undertook the design and supply, or the technical design and supply of the facades with Neil and Craig from Pure Consulting in Johannesburg as facade engineers, together with Arab, that the aspect of the envelope of the building has taken that into consideration very, very intensively. And, you know, what would seem to be, you know, a relatively fragile material, which is not widely used in this country, has an immense resilience to it, bearing in mind that it's a ventilated facade, and the corrosive aspects of the fixing methodologies and the nature of that material and its kind of construction connectivity, if you like, was all very, very heavily workshopped.
Yeah, I'm just aware of it because I had the experience of having a building done just off the esplanade where wind tunnels through between buildings, taking a roof off, and the wind speeds are incredible. So it is a factor, I know. But it's a great building. Thanks, George. Thanks, Greg. Really is good.
Thanks very much, Ivor.
Yep. I'll take Ryan Malcolm and then Adima after him. Ryan.
Hello, Ryan. You're on mute, I think.
Yeah, he's on mute. Ryan. Okay, maybe we'll come back to him. Adima, are you ready?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Thanks for the presentation and congratulations on a beautiful building, George and Greg and your team at EPA. I think the first thing that kind of strikes me is the nod to landscape in the Point waterfront area. You know, I mean, equally Rod Koromansky's, what was it, the water tunnel, the harbour mouth water tunnel there. And I think maybe just in response to the fencing kind of catastrophe that you're now faced with, perhaps it presents an opportunity for us as an institute and the profession at large in engaging with the realities of living in a region that is so ravaged, I suppose, by social unrest and displeasure and its associations to the spatial environment. And maybe what we need to be talking about and how do we find, I suppose, the stakeholders to have that conversation. Because I think that it would allow ourselves to relate a lot more to not only the landscape, but as you've attempted to do, I suppose, true cultural heritages of an environment like the Point. You know, I mean, what's sorely missing for me personally is the nod to the 1860 Indian settlers in the Point waterfront. And so, how do we build these conversations that are meaningful to, I suppose, the public realm as well as our interventions architecturally in a space like the Point waterfront, but just in general, well done, and that roof is really rad. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Adima. I think perhaps if I can make a comment about that. So, and Jonathan, maybe you want to elaborate on this, but extensive discussions with the city around a greater connection to the city in the form of materiality extension of materiality across the resurfacing of Mahatma Gandhi Road, and a connection, the extension of the promenade down the harbour mouth through to, at least for the time being, to connect to that piazza was all very extensively discussed with the city, who I think made some effort to engage, but the problem was the financial consideration. I don't know, Jonathan, if you'd like to elaborate on that, because I think what you're suggesting is engaging with the stakeholders, and the major stakeholder here is the city.
Yeah. I think George and Greg, thanks for a great presentation, first of all. But in terms of the heritage aspects, I think it's such an important component of a catalytic project like this. And but it is really a responsibility of the city and not of a private investor. And that's where the link up through Browns Road and back to the promenade starts to become a really important next phase of the project, which between Durban Point Development Company and the city, we need to get right, so that that whole element of the point landscape becomes the celebration of movement and people within that space. I think it's a good opportunity to have that sort of impact, and that's a project which I think as an institute we could contribute to, and I'd be very happy to set up the conversations on the city side, where we've got very, very good responses across all, from the technical to the heritage issues, from Catalytic Projects Unit in particular, and from the urban designers as well. Yeah.
Thanks, George. Thanks, Jonathan. And just in parting quickly, if you don't mind, I think maybe one of the fundamentals for us to hold in that conversation is, of course, it requires us to extend our definitions and dialogues of cultural heritage, and our responsibility as an institute to communicate that with the city as well. Going beyond the isiZulu into Indian heritages, into mixed heritages, and what that looks like, because I don't think that conversation is really being had anywhere. But yeah, thank you very much for your responses, and have a good Friday and weekend.
Thanks, Ajima. Before I come to you, Pat, Kim, are you able to unmute Ryan Malcolm from your side?
Everyone is able to unmute themselves. I've just responded to the chat, but Skura, would you like me to read out his question?
Yeah, sure. Sure.
Ryan Malcolm's question to George and Greg is to ask about the technical solution of the facade, for more detail really about how it functions. And a quick note from Mr. Postma, I think it's Greg Postma, Vincent Postma wants to know, how much sleep did you guys lose over this project, particularly you, Greg?
A fair bit. We don't talk about it. I think maybe just to elaborate on Ryan's question in terms of the technical derivation, and just to maybe take a step back. So the envelope and the folded aesthetic, if you will, is quite a complex formal issue. It looks very simple when one sees it complete, but the issue lies in the seams. So the fold lines. It's very easy to fold a piece of paper where the lines need to end up where they need to end up, but the moment you start adding mass to that,
and layers,
the lines don't end up where they need to end up. So that is simply a preface that highlights the complete and utter lack of tolerance that we had on this building. So we set the building out from the ceiling up, basically because if everything went wrong and that those lines didn't end up where they needed to end up, that at least the human interface, what people see on a day-to-day basis, would be correct. But what it meant is that on the roof and on the side walls and the junctions where the facets end, it meant that there were almost negative tolerances and positive tolerances. So there was a tolerance difference of as much as 306 millimeters across the extent, which doesn't sound like a lot, until you start to set this thing out in real world space, and not only set it out, but you're now going to set out a modulated triangulation in three-dimensional space, which made things very, very interesting. So the solution itself as a ventilated facade, it's not too dissimilar to other ventilated facades that I think most of us have looked into. It's a shed. It makes use of an aluminium profile roofing system as our waterline. On top of that is a substructure, and then connected to that, which deals or connected to what connects the substructure to the sheeting, is what is known as a helping hand bracket, which allows us to deal with those tolerance issues. And that helping hand bracket is adjustable, and it allows us to increase edges and decrease edges where we needed to across the length of those planes. And then obviously the mineralis panels are just fixed to those. I hope that answers the question.
I think Greg, if I may add, as a more of an observer to the technical execution of the building, Vanessa and Greg, Vanessa is the senior technologist in our practice who was involved in this with Greg. I think perhaps my observation is that 50% of the energy of this project went into making what Greg describes. So it's beguilingly simple, but incredibly complex. And I think also hats off to Arup from an engineering point of view. You've got some cantilevers there which are nearly 60 meters long across the kind of diagonal as you approach the building from the north. This is not a small feat, and then dealing with deflections and unexpected connectivities undertaken. The steelwork was undertaken by Avellini, old hands in the Durban steel space. So, in as much as you don't see the steelwork, believe me, what's behind there is extraordinarily complicated.
Thank you, guys. Mr. Patrick Smith.
Cool. Thanks, Skura. George, just to say, yeah, to you and your team, absolutely stunning building. Well done. And I think what's wonderful about these buildings is they're always such amazing opportunities to learn. I think what you've spoken about just with regards to the facade and what have you. But I think your other point you made with a building is actually the art. And I must say, I think it's delightful just to see such a sculptural building where really it forms it really is something quite iconic, and that will, you've certainly left an indelible mark there. So yeah, to you and your team, yeah, stunning building, definitely well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. That means a lot.
Patrick.
George, I wanted to ask something as well. Was the EIA needed, looking at the proximity with the water, or was it something that because there's been proposals in the area, there's something that's been worked on? It's not necessarily a completely new site if you look at the platform.
Yeah, so the EIA was undertaken, but it obviously, as you mentioned, it's an existing site. What was very interesting is that during construction, when we were piling the building, the piling probably took 3 times longer than we initially anticipated because we kept hitting stuff. The site itself is almost like an archaeological dig in that it has just layers and layers and layers of history, all piled one on top of the other. So we had environmental consultants who, every time we hit something, we had to, do reports and provide all sorts of feedback to the relevant authorities. So quite a complex undertaking, I would say.
Yeah, it does look like it. Thank you so much, guys. Though I think everybody appreciate how you've packaged and presented the project. That was actually quite clear. So we really, really appreciate that, guys. Thank you so much.
Our pleasure.
Thanks
Yeah.
very much.
Any last comment or question from the floor? Looks like everybody's happy. But Greg and George, thank you so much once again for taking us through your building. Really appreciate that.
Thanks very much for having us.
Yeah.
Well done. Well done.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank
Thank you, guys.
Cheers,
Thank you
guys.
for joining
Thank
once
you.
again.
Super.
Thank
Enjoy
you.
the
Well done.
weekend.
Thanks very
Thank
much,
you.
guys.
Happy
Yeah.
Friday.
Bye.
Bye.
Well done to George and Greg. Fantastic building. Thank you very much.
Good, guys. Thank you very much.